I watched my mother die while a man in a $5,000 suit checked his Rolex. I was holding a black American Express card in my hand, a card with a limit high enough to buy this entire building. But the doctor wouldn't even look at it. He just looked at my muddy boots, my torn Ranger fatigues, and he sneered. He didn't see a son trying to save his mother. He saw a piece of trash. And because of his arrogance, the only person who ever loved me is gone. Hit like, subscribe for more betrayal stories, and comment your city or country. The sound of a flat line is the loudest silence in the world. It's a high-pitched scream that doesn't stop, piercing right through your brain. Beep. I stood there, frozen. My hand was still gripping the cold metal rail of the gurney. Her hand, my mother Clara's hand, was still warm in mine. But the life was gone. I stared at her face. Her eyes were half open, staring at the fluorescent lights of the hallway. Not a room. The hallway. They hadn't even given her the dignity of a room. Time of death, 8:42 p.m., a voice said. It was bored. Impatient. I slowly turned my head. Dr. Julian stood there, tapping a pen against his clipboard. He was immaculate. Perfect hair, perfect teeth, a white coat that looked like it had never seen a drop of blood. He looked at me with pure annoyance, like I had just inconvenienced his dinner plans. I told you, mister. He looked down at the clipboard, pretending to forget my name. Mr. Hunter. Her heart was too weak. Even if we had admitted her, the insurance verification would have taken too long. This isn't a charity ward. My vision blurred. It wasn't tears. It was rage. Pure, white-hot rage. 2 hours ago, I had landed on American soil. I hadn't even showered. I had come straight from a 9-month deployment in a place where the sand gets into your soul. I had driven my truck like a maniac when I got the call from the neighbor that Mom had collapsed. I scooped her up. I drove her here, to the best trauma center in the city. When I burst through those ER doors, carrying my mother in my arms like a child, I was screaming for help. Nurses rushed over. They were ready. But then he walked in. Dr. Julian, the chief of surgery. He took one look at me. I was covered in dust. My t-shirt was stained with sweat and oil. I hadn't shaved in weeks. To him, I looked like a homeless drifter or a broke grunt looking for a handout. Stabilize her and transfer her to county, he had ordered. We don't have beds for uninsured cases. I can pay. I had yelled, my voice cracking. I have money. Just save her. I had reached into my pocket. My wallet was jammed behind my tactical knife. I tried to pull out the card, the black metal card that represented the fortune I had made in tech investments before I ever enlisted. The fortune nobody, not even my wife, knew the full extent of. But Julian had laughed. A short, cruel chuckle. Look, soldier, he had said, stepping into my personal space. County is 10 minutes away. If you leave now, you might make it. Stop wasting my time. He turned his back. He walked away. And in those 10 minutes while the nurses hesitated, terrified of disobeying him, she died. Now, standing over her body, the silence of the machine was deafening. You didn't even try, I whispered. My voice sounded jagged, like broken glass. Julian sighed, checking his watch again. We follow protocol. You didn't have proof of funds. You didn't have insurance on file. It's unfortunate, but unfortunate. I stepped toward him. The security guard in the corner put his hand on his belt. I didn't care. I was 6'2" of Ranger-trained muscle, and right now, I wanted to tear this man apart with my bare hands. You let her die because you didn't like my boots, I said, my voice rising. You let her die because you thought I was poor. Julian finally looked me in the eye. His eyes were cold, dead things. I let her die because she was a lost cause, and this hospital is a business. Now, please, remove the body, or we will have to charge you a holding fee. A holding fee. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. I looked back at my mother. Clara. She had worked 2 jobs her whole life to raise me. She had scraped pennies together so I could have school clothes. She was the only person who never asked me for a dime, even when I made millions. She just wanted me to come home safe. I had come home, but I hadn't saved her. I reached out and gently closed her eyes. My hand was trembling. I leaned down and kissed her forehead. It was starting to cool. "I'm sorry, Mom," I whispered. "I'm so sorry." I straightened up. The grief was still there, heavy as a stone in my chest, but something else was wrapping around it. A cold, calculated resolve. I looked at Dr. Julian one last time. I memorized his face. I memorized the way his name was stitched in blue thread on his white coat. Dr. Julian V. I memorized the arrogant smirk playing on his lips. I didn't scream. I didn't throw a punch. I didn't pull out the black card to prove him wrong. Not yet. If I showed him the money now, he would just apologize. He would say it was a misunderstanding. He would try to settle. No, I didn't want his apology. I didn't want a settlement. I wanted his life. I wanted to take everything he had, piece by piece, until he was the one standing in the dirt begging for help that would never come. I turned around and walked toward the exit doors. The automatic doors slid open, letting in the humid night air. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. My hands were steady now. I dialed a number I hadn't called in 9 months. "Oliver," I said when the voice answered on the second ring. "Hunter? My God, you're back? Where are you? I need you to do something for me," I said. I walked over to my truck, looking back at the massive, shining glass building of the hospital. It looked like a fortress built on bones. "Anything, Hunter. What is it?" "I want to know who owns the Mercy General Hospital Group," I said, staring at the window where my mother lay dead. "And I want to know how much it costs to buy them out." "Buy them?" Oliver paused. "Hunter, that's a billion-dollar acquisition." "What?" I watched Dr. Julian walk out of the hospital entrance. He was laughing into his phone, keys to a Porsche in his hand. He looked happy, alive. "Because I'm going to burn it down," I said. "And I want to make sure I own the matches." "Hunter, you're grieving. Don't make decisions like this tonight." Oliver's voice was gentle over the phone, but I cut the call. I tossed the phone onto the passenger seat of my truck and just sat there. The engine was cold. The dashboard was dusty. Outside, the city lights reflected off the sleek glass of the hospital, mocking me. Somewhere on the 3rd floor, my mother was being moved to the morgue. And down here, in the parking lot, the man who killed her was pulling out in a silver Porsche 911. I watched him go. I memorized the license plate. SVRGN1. Sovereign. As if he was a king. I didn't start the truck immediately. I just gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white, trying to force air into my lungs. The adrenaline of the confrontation was fading, and the crushing weight of reality was settling in. She was gone. The house would be empty. The Sunday calls were over. I needed to go home. I needed my wife. I started the engine and drove. The drive to our suburban home was a blur of streetlights and shadows. I kept expecting my phone to ring, expecting Morgan to call and ask where I was. I had texted her when I landed. I had texted her when I got the call about Mom. Radio silence. I pulled into the driveway of the house I had bought 3 years ago. It was a nice place, 2 stories, white picket fence, the American dream I had tried to build for Morgan while hiding the true extent of my wealth. To her, I was a soldier with a surprisingly good retirement fund and some lucky stock picks. She didn't know about the software patents. She didn't know about the offshore accounts Oliver managed. The lights were on downstairs. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The air conditioning hit me, cool and smelling of vanilla candles. "Morgan," I called out. My voice was rough, exhausted. She walked out of the kitchen, holding a glass of wine. She was wearing a silk robe I had bought her for our anniversary. She looked beautiful, but her expression wasn't one of relief or sadness. It was irritation. "You're finally here," she said, taking a sip of wine. She didn't run to hug me. She didn't ask about Mom. She just leaned against the doorframe. "I saw your text. Is she, you know?" "She's dead, Morgan," I said, dropping my duffel bag on the floor. The heavy thud echoed in the hallway. She winced, as if the word was too loud. "Oh, I'm sorry, Hunter. That's really sad." She took another sip of wine. I stood there, waiting for her to cross the room, waiting for her to hold me. I had just watched my mother die. I had just come back from war. I needed my wife. But she stayed where she was. Are you going to shower? She asked, scrunching her nose slightly. You smell like airplane fuel and sweat. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. My mother just died, Morgan. The doctor refused to treat her because he thought we were poor. Morgan sighed, setting the glass down. Well, Hunter, let's be honest. You do look like a mess. And without insurance. Hospitals are businesses, you know. You can't expect them to work for free. I stared at her. It was like looking at a stranger. Since when did she sound like that? Since when did she defend a system that just killed my mother? I'm going to take a shower, I said quietly. I didn't have the energy to fight. Not yet. I walked past her. As I brushed by, I caught a scent. It wasn't the vanilla candle. It was cologne. A sharp, musky, expensive men's cologne clinging to her robe. I stopped on the stairs. My mind flashed back to the hospital, to the hallway, to Dr. Julian standing over me. It was the same smell. I shook my head. No, I was paranoid. I was tired. It was a popular brand. Half the men in the city probably wore it. I forced myself to keep walking up the stairs. The next 3 days were a fog of logistics. I had to arrange the funeral. I had to deal with the coroner. I had to sign papers. Morgan was busy the whole time. She had yoga. She had brunch with friends. She had errands. She helped with nothing. The day of the funeral was gray and drizzling. We stood at the graveside. Just me, a few of Mom's old friends from the diner where she worked, and Morgan. Morgan was wearing a black dress that was a little too tight, a little too short for a funeral. She spent the entire service looking at her phone. Her thumbs were flying across the screen, hiding it under her umbrella. As the priest spoke about Clara's kindness, I watched my wife. She wasn't crying. She was smiling at her screen. A small, secret smile. I leaned over slightly, just an inch. New message from Jay. Did the soldier boy cry? I froze. Morgan saw me looking and quickly snapped the screen off, shoving the phone into her purse. She looked up at me, her face composing itself into a mask of fake sympathy. Almost done, she whispered loudly. My heels are sinking into the mud. I looked at the coffin. Then I looked at her. Yeah, I said, my voice dead calm. It's almost done. After the burial, we drove home in silence. As soon as we walked in the door, Morgan kicked off her heels. God, that was depressing, she said. I need a drink. Oh, by the way, Hunter, since your mom is gone, we should talk about the house. The house? I asked, loosening my tie. Her house, Morgan said, walking into the kitchen. It's old. It's in a bad neighborhood. We should sell it fast. The market is hot. We could use the cash for a vacation. You know, to help you grieve. She wanted to sell my mother's home. The home Clara had worked 40 years to pay off. She wanted to sell it for a vacation. We don't need the money, Morgan, I said, leaning against the counter. We always need money. Hunter, she snapped, spinning around. You're out of the service now. That army paycheck is gone. What are you going to do? Work security? We have bills. I have standards. She didn't know. She had no idea that I could buy her standards 1,000 times over. I'll figure it out, I said. I'm going to go for a drive. I need to clear my head. Fine, she said, pouring herself more wine. Don't be late. I have a migraine. I'm going to bed early. I walked back out to my truck. But I didn't leave. I pulled the truck down the street, parked it behind a line of hedges where I couldn't be seen from the house, and I killed the lights. I waited. I was a ranger. Surveillance was my job. If my gut was telling me something was wrong, I listened to it. And right now, my gut was screaming. 20 minutes later, the garage door opened. Morgan's red sedan pulled out. She wasn't wearing her migraine pajamas. She was wearing a red dress I had never seen before. She turned left, heading toward the city. I started my truck, keeping the headlights off until I was well behind her. I followed her for 30 minutes. She didn't go to a friend's house. She didn't go to the pharmacy. She pulled into the underground parking garage of a luxury steakhouse downtown. The Prime Cut. It was the most expensive restaurant in the city. I parked 3 rows back. I watched her get out of the car. She checked her makeup in the side mirror, fixing her lipstick. She looked excited, radiant. She walked toward the elevator. I got out of my truck, pulled my cap low over my eyes, and followed. The restaurant was dimly lit, filled with the clinking of expensive silverware and the hum of rich people talking. I stayed in the shadows near the bar. I scanned the room, and then I saw her. She was sitting in a booth in the back corner. But she wasn't alone. A man was sitting across from her. He was laughing, holding a glass of scotch. He was wearing a navy blue suit. He reached across the table and took her hand, kissing her knuckles. It was him, Dr. Julian, the man who had watched my mother die 3 days ago, the man who had called us charity cases. He was sitting there, holding my wife's hand, laughing with her. My vision tunneled. The world narrowed down to that booth. It wasn't just bad luck. It wasn't just a rude doctor. My wife was sleeping with the man who killed my mother. I stood in the shadows of the restaurant bar, my hand gripping a glass of water so hard I thought it might shatter. The waiter asked if I wanted a menu, but I just stared past him. At the corner booth, Morgan threw her head back and laughed. It was a loud, carefree laugh, the kind I hadn't heard from her in years. Dr. Julian smiled, swirling his scotch, looking at her with a predatory hunger. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to walk over there, to flip the table, to smash his face into his expensive steak and demand to know how long this had been going on, to scream at Morgan for betraying me while my mother's grave was still fresh. But I didn't move. In the military, they teach you that anger is a weapon, but only if you control it. If you let it control you, you die. If I stormed over there now, I would just be the jealous, unstable soldier husband. Julian would call security. Morgan would cry and play the victim. They would spin it. No, I needed more than a scene. I needed ammunition. I pulled out my phone and opened the camera app. I zoomed in. Snap. A photo of them holding hands. Snap. A photo of Julian feeding her a bite of dessert. Snap. A photo of them kissing. A long, passionate kiss right there in the open, like they didn't have a care in the world. My stomach churned, acid rising in my throat. This wasn't a new fling. You don't kiss like that on a first date. This was comfortable. Established. I watched them for another hour. When the check came, Julian paid with a platinum card. As they stood up to leave, I retreated to the emergency exit, slipping out into the cool night air before they could spot me. I sprinted back to my truck in the parking garage. I slumped into the seat, breathing hard. My phone buzzed in my hand. New text from Morgan. Hey babe, migraine is getting worse. Took some pills and going to sleep. Don't wake me up when you get in. Love you. I looked at the text. Then I looked up as the elevator doors opened. Morgan and Julian walked out, arm in arm. They weren't going to separate cars. They were walking toward his Porsche. Love you. I whispered to the empty truck, my voice dripping with venom. Right. I didn't follow them this time. I knew where they were going. I didn't need to see my wife in another man's bed tonight. I needed to talk to the one person who could help me burn their world down. I drove straight to Oliver's office. It was 11 p.m., but I knew he'd be there. Oliver wasn't just my lawyer. He was the only guy from my old neighborhood who made it out without a gun or a badge. He managed my portfolio, my patents, everything. When I walked in, Oliver looked up from his desk, startled. He took one look at my face and closed his laptop. You look like you're ready to kill someone, he said. I might be. I replied, tossing my phone onto his desk. Look at the photos. Oliver swiped through them. His eyes widened. Isn't that the doctor? The one from the ER? Yeah, and that's my wife. Oliver let out a long breath, rubbing his temples. Hunter, this is messy. Divorce is one thing, but if they're involved, it's not just an affair, Oliver. I interrupted, pacing the room. Think about it. Why did he refuse to treat my mom? He said she had no insurance. But Morgan knows I have money. Maybe not the millions, but she knows I have good insurance from the service. She could have told him. I stopped pacing. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Unless she wanted her dead, I said softly. Oliver looked at me sharply. Hunter, that's a heavy accusation. Murder? What? The house, I said, remembering the conversation from earlier. Morgan has been pushing me to sell Mom's house. She thinks I'm broke. She thinks the only asset I have is that property and my life insurance. I looked at Oliver. If Mom dies, I inherit the house. If I die, she gets everything. You think they're planning to kill you? Oliver asked, his voice dropping to a whisper. I think they're planning to clean me out, I said. Julian kills my mom by negligence. Morgan convinces me to sell the assets. Then, who knows? Maybe a tragic accident for the grieving soldier. I leaned over the desk, placing my hands flat on the polished wood. I want to buy the hospital, Oliver. I wasn't joking. Oliver sighed, opening his laptop again. Okay, let's look at it. Mercy General is private, owned by a consortium of investors. They've been bleeding money for years. Malpractice suits, outdated equipment, bad management. They're desperate for a buyout. He typed furiously for a moment. The controlling stake is 51%. The current valuation is depressed. You could pick it up for about $45 million. You have the liquidity, Hunter. But are you sure? It's a bad investment. The building is falling apart. I don't want a return on investment, I said, my voice cold. I want a return on pain. Okay, Oliver said, typing again. I can set up a shell company. Phoenix Holdings. We can make an aggressive offer tomorrow morning. The board will bite your hand off. But you need to stay anonymous. If Julian knows it's you, he'll run. He won't know, I said. Not until it's too late. I stood up. Get the paperwork ready. I'm going home. Hunter, Oliver warned. You have to go home to that woman. You have to sleep in the same bed as her. Can you do that? Can you look her in the face and not snap her neck? I paused at the door. I thought about the training. The hours lying in the mud, waiting for a target, not moving a muscle while bugs crawled over my face. I'm a ranger, Oliver, I said. I can survive anything, even her. I drove home. The house was dark when I arrived. Morgan's car was back in the garage. She must have slipped in while I was at Oliver's. I walked upstairs. The bedroom door was open. Morgan was in bed, pretending to be asleep. Her breathing was too rhythmic, too perfect. I stripped off my clothes and climbed into bed beside her. She stirred, feigning grogginess. Hunter, she mumbled. You're back late. Did you have a nice drive? Yeah, I said, staring at the ceiling. Very enlightening. She shifted, draping an arm over my chest. The same arm that had been holding Julian's hand 2 hours ago. It took every ounce of my willpower not to shove her away. I missed you, she lied. I missed you too, I lied back. The next morning, the game began. I woke up early and made coffee. When Morgan came down, I was sitting at the table, looking at a stack of bills I had pulled from the mail. I made sure to look stressed. Morning, I said, rubbing my face. Everything okay? She asked, pouring herself a cup. It's just the funeral costs, I said, throwing a paper on the table. And the hospital sent a bill for the attempted resuscitation. They want $5,000 just for the 10 minutes she was in the hallway. Morgan sipped her coffee, hiding a smile. See? I told you, Hunter. We need cash. We should call a realtor about your mom's house today. I looked at her. I decided to give her enough rope to hang herself. You know what? I said, sighing. You're right. Maybe we should sell. But I need to go to the bank first. See if I can get a loan or something. Don't worry about a loan, she said quickly. Just sell the house. It's cleaner. I'll think about it, I said, standing up. I have to go meet a buddy. Old army friend. Says he might have a security job for me. Good, she said, kissing my cheek. You need to work. Idleness isn't good for you. I walked out the door. I didn't go to a security job. I went to an electronics store. I bought 3 high-definition spy cameras and a voice-activated listening device. I waited until Morgan left for her yoga class, which I knew was another date with Julian. Then I went back inside my own house. I placed 1 camera in the living room, hidden in the smoke detector, 1 in the kitchen, behind the vent, and 1 in the bedroom, facing the bed. If they were plotting against me, they would talk about it here. They felt safe here. I drove back to Oliver's office. He was waiting for me with a thick stack of documents. It's done, Oliver said, handing me a pen. The offer was submitted an hour ago. The board chairman already called me. He was practically crying with relief. They want to close in 48 hours. I took the pen. I looked at the signature line. Phoenix Holdings. Does Julian know? I asked. Not yet. Oliver grinned. The board is keeping it quiet until the ink is dry. They don't want the staff to panic. I signed the paper. Congratulations, Oliver said. You just bought a hospital. No, I said, capping the pen. I just bought a trap. My phone buzzed. It was an alert from the home security app one had just installed. Motion detected. Living room. I pulled up the feed. Morgan was home. And she wasn't alone. Dr. Julian walked into the frame. He was wearing scrubs. He looked agitated. Are you sure he's gone? Julian asked, looking around my living room. He's gone. Relax, Morgan said, handing him a beer. He thinks he's getting a job as a security guard. It's pathetic. We need to move faster, Julian said, pacing. The board is acting weird. Rumors of a buyout. If new management comes in, they might audit the ER logs. If they see what happened with his mother. Stop worrying, Morgan laughed. Hunter is an idiot. He's signing the house over to a realtor next week. Once we have that cash, we can leave. We can go to the Caymans. Julian stopped pacing. He looked at Morgan. And what about him? He's not just going to let you leave with the money. Morgan smiled. It was a cold, terrifying smile. Hunter has PTSD, doesn't he? She said softly. Everyone knows soldiers are unstable. If he has a tragic accident with his own gun, nobody would be surprised. I watched the screen, my blood turning to ice. They weren't just thieves. They were planning my suicide. Okay, I said to Oliver, showing him the screen. Change of plans. What? Oliver asked, looking at the video, his face pale. Don't just buy the hospital, I said. I want to buy the land underneath it. And I want to check the demolition permits for the county. Demolition? Oliver asked. Hunter, what are you doing? I'm going to give them exactly what they want, I said. A tragedy. Demolition permits? Oliver stared at me, his pen hovering over the legal pad. Hunter, you can't just buy a functioning hospital and blow it up. There are zoning laws, EPA regulations, city council approvals. I didn't say blow it up. I corrected him, my eyes still glued to the live feed on my phone where my wife was discussing my murder. I said I want to check the demolition permits. I happen to know that the Mercy General building was constructed in the 70s with asbestos insulation. They've been dodging code violations for a decade. I looked up at Oliver. If the new owner, me, decides the building is structurally unsound and a health hazard, I can order an emergency condemnation. I can shut it down. And once it's shut down, I can burn it. Oliver rubbed his face, looking torn between horror and admiration. You want to burn a $45 million asset to the ground to make a point. It's not about the money, Oliver. It's about the cleansing. I pointed at the screen. They killed my mother for pennies. They're planning to kill me for a house. I want to take away the only thing that matters to Julian, his status, his little kingdom. Oliver sighed, then started typing. I'll call the city planner. I know a guy. If we frame it as a public safety initiative to build a modern facility, they'll fast-track the demo permits. But it will cost you another $5 million in bribes. I mean, expedited filing fees. Do it, I said. And one more thing. I need you to hire a private investigator. Not to track them. I'm doing that. I need someone to dig into Julian's past. If he let my mom die to save a buck, she wasn't the first. Done, Oliver said. I drove home with a plan forming in my mind. I had to play the role of the unsuspecting victim for just a little longer. I had to make them feel safe. When I walked in the door, the house was empty again. Julian had left. Morgan was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables with a little too much force. Hey, she said, not looking up. Did you get the job? I slumped my shoulders, acting defeated. No. Said I was overqualified, but underexperienced for corporate security. Basically, they think I'm just a grunt with a gun. Morgan turned around, feigning sympathy. Oh, honey, that's terrible. She walked over and hugged me. I could feel the tension in her body. She didn't want to touch me. She was doing it because she had to. See? This is why we need to sell the house. It will give us a cushion while you figure things out. Yeah, I said, pulling away. You're right. I'll call the realtor tomorrow. Her eyes lit up. Really? That's a very mature decision, Hunter. I just want you to be happy, I said. I'm going to go clean my gun. If I'm going to keep applying for security jobs, I need to make sure my gear is in order. I watched her face carefully. At the mention of the gun, her pupils dilated. Fear? No. Excitement. Okay, she said. Be careful. I went to the garage, where I kept my workbench. I disassembled my service pistol, cleaning each part methodically. I knew she was watching me from the doorway, ensuring I was actually doing it. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed, listening to her breathe, thinking about the recording. If he has a tragic accident, nobody would be surprised. The next morning, the call came. Mr. Hunter? It was Oliver. The bid is accepted. The wire transfer cleared. As of 9 a.m. this morning, Phoenix Holdings is the sole owner of Mercy General Hospital. Does the staff know? I asked, stepping into the backyard so Morgan wouldn't hear. Not yet. We scheduled an emergency board meeting for tomorrow at noon to introduce the new ownership. Julian will be there. He thinks he's meeting some foreign investors. Perfect, I said. And the permits? The city is thrilled. Apparently, that building is a ticking time bomb of violations. They've pre-approved a controlled burn for training purposes, provided the building is vacant. You have the green light. Good. I hung up and walked back inside. Morgan was on the couch, looking at Zillow on her iPad. I have some news, I said. She looked up. Did you find a buyer for the house? Better, I said. I have to go away for a few days. A buddy of mine in Special Forces called. There's a private contracting gig. High risk, high pay. It's a quick extraction job. It was a lie, of course, but it was the perfect bait. Oh, Morgan sat up. Where? Is it dangerous? Very, I said gravely. But the payout is 50 grand for 3 days of work. It could solve our problems. You should go, she said, almost too quickly. I mean, if it helps us. Be safe, obviously. But go. She wanted me gone. She wanted the house to herself so she could bring Julian over. And she probably hoped I'd get shot overseas so she wouldn't have to stage my suicide. I leave tonight, I said. I packed a bag. I kissed her goodbye, a cold, dry peck on the cheek. I drove my truck down the street, turned the corner, and then circled back. I parked 3 streets away and hiked back through the woods to the rear of my property. I set up a small observation post in the tree line, armed with my laptop and a directional microphone. I didn't have to wait long. 30 minutes after I left, Julian's Porsche pulled into my driveway. He didn't even knock. He used a key. My key. I opened the laptop and pulled up the living room camera. They were celebrating. Morgan was pouring champagne. He's gone, Julian asked, kicking his shoes off. For 3 days, Morgan laughed. Some stupid merc job. Hopefully, he steps on a landmine. To the idiot soldier, Julian toasted, raising his glass. To us, Morgan said. And to the money. They clinked glasses. So, Julian said, sitting on my couch, putting his feet up on my coffee table. The board meeting is tomorrow. I heard rumors that the new owners are Saudis. That means deep pockets. I'm going to ask for a raise. Maybe a new research wing. I watched them, a dark smile forming on my face. You should, Morgan said. You're the star surgeon. They'd be lucky to have you. I am the hospital, Julian said arrogantly. Without me, that place is just a morgue. I closed the laptop. Not for long, I whispered. I spent the night in a motel near the hospital. I shaved my beard. I cut my hair. I put on the finest suit I owned, a custom-tailored Italian charcoal suit I hadn't worn since my days in the boardroom before the army. I looked in the mirror. The soldier was gone. The billionaire was back. The next morning, at 11:55 a.m., I pulled up to Mercy General. But I didn't park in the visitor lot. I parked in the spot marked reserved for Chief of Staff. Julian's spot. I saw Julian's Porsche parked illegally in the ambulance bay nearby. Typical. I walked into the lobby. The air smelled of antiseptic and floor wax. The receptionist looked up, annoyed. "Can I help you?" she asked, popping gum. "I'm here for the board meeting," I said calmly. "Boardroom is on the 4th floor, but it's restricted access." "Who are you?" I didn't answer. I just walked past her to the elevators. Sir, you can't go up there," she yelled. A security guard stepped in my path. "Sir, I need to see some ID," the guard said, putting a hand on my chest. I looked at his hand. Then I looked at his eyes. "Move," I said. It wasn't a shout. It was a command. The guard hesitated. He saw the suit. He saw the eyes. He stepped back. I stepped into the elevator and pressed 4. As the doors closed, I checked my phone. Oliver had sent a text. "Everyone is seated. Julian is at the head of the table. Showtime." The elevator dinged. The doors opened to the executive floor. It was quiet here. Plush carpets. Mahogany doors. I walked down the hall to the double doors at the end. I could hear voices inside. "The new ownership structure will be beneficial for all of us," Julian's voice was saying. "I have several proposals for salary adjustments." I didn't knock. I kicked the double doors open. Both of them. Bang. The room went silent. 12 people in suits turned to look. Dr. Julian was standing at the head of the table, a pointer in his hand. He froze. He squinted at me. He didn't recognize me immediately without the beard and the dirt. "Excuse me," Julian snapped. "This is a private meeting." Security. I walked into the room, my dress shoes clicking on the hardwood floor. I didn't stop until I was at the opposite end of the long table, facing him. "You're in my seat, Julian," I said. Julian's eyes widened. He recognized the voice. "Hunter," he whispered. Then he laughed. A nervous, confused laugh. "They're the dead patient's son? What are you doing here? How did you get in?" "Look, if you're here to beg for a refund." "I'm not here for a refund," I said, placing my hands on the table. "I'm here for the keys." "What are you talking about?" Julian sneered. "Get out before I have you arrested for trespassing." Oliver stood up from the side of the room. He cleared his throat. "Actually, Dr. Julian," Oliver said, "Mr. Hunter isn't trespassing. He's the chairman of Phoenix Holdings." Silence. Absolute, suffocating silence. Julian looked at Oliver, then at me, then back at Oliver. That's impossible," Julian stammered. "He's a grunt. A broke soldier." "I was a soldier," I said, unbuttoning my jacket. "But before that, I was the lead developer for encryption software that protects half the banks in this country. I didn't tell you that when you let my mother die over an insurance card." I pulled a remote from my pocket and pointed it at the projector screen behind Julian. "Sit down, Julian," I said. "I will not. Sit down." I warned. The command echoed off the walls. Julian collapsed into his chair. "Good," I said, my voice dropping back to a terrifying calm. "Now, before we discuss my mother, let's discuss your little conversation with my wife last night." I pressed the button on the remote. The screen flickered. The video from my living room appeared. Julian's voice boomed through the speakers. "If he has a tragic accident, nobody would be surprised." The board members gasped. One woman covered her mouth. Julian's face went white as his coat. "Welcome to your performance review," I said. The video froze on the screen. A still image of Dr. Julian's face twisted in a laugh, a beer in his hand, plotting my death in my own home. For 10 seconds, the only sound in the boardroom was the hum of the projector fan. The 12 board members sat in stunned silence, their eyes darting between the screen, Julian, and me. Julian was gripping the edge of the mahogany table so hard his knuckles were white. He opened his mouth, closed it, and then opened it again. "It's a deep fake," he blurted out, his voice cracking. He looked frantically at the board members. "You know how advanced AI is these days. He generated this. He's a software guy, he just said so. This is blackmail." He pointed a shaking finger at me. "This man is mentally unstable. His mother died, and he's lashing out. Security, get him out of here." I didn't move. I didn't shout. I just reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a small, metallic object. I tossed it onto the table. It slid across the polished wood, and stopped right in front of Julian. It was the SD card from the camera. The metadata is on there, Julian, I said calmly. Time-stamped. GPS tagged. Encrypted with a key that only I hold. A forensic audit will prove that audio is raw and unedited. But we both know you don't need an audit. You remember saying it. Julian stared at the card like it was a live grenade. The blood drained from his face, leaving him looking gray and sickly. The board chairman, a heavy-set man named Mr. Henderson, stood up. He looked furious, not at me, but at the liability sitting at the head of the table. Dr. Julian, Henderson barked. Is this true? Were you intimately involved with a patient's family member? Did you conspire to? He couldn't even finish the sentence. The legal implications were catastrophic. Julian stammered. It was just talk. Locker room talk. We were venting. You were discussing murder, I corrected him. And insurance fraud. And malpractice. Henderson turned to me, wiping sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Mr. Hunter or Mr. Chairman? Obviously, we had no idea. This is a rogue employee. We will accept Dr. Julian's immediate resignation, of course. We will cooperate fully with any investigation. He forced a smile, trying to salvage his own position. We can handle this quietly. Make sure the hospital's reputation remains intact. We are happy to work with you as the new majority shareholder. I looked at Henderson. Then I looked at the other suits around the table. They were all nodding, desperate to save their own skins. They didn't care about my mother. They didn't care about the ethics. They just wanted to keep the cash flow running. You don't get it, I said softly. I walked over to the window, looking out at the city skyline. You think I bought this place to fix it? I asked, turning back to face them. You think I want to sit in these meetings and discuss quarterly earnings with the people who hired this monster? I pointed at Julian. You enabled him, I said, my voice rising. You looked at the complaints. I saw the files Oliver pulled. 3 separate wrongful death suits against Dr. Julian in the last 5 years. All settled out of court. All buried. You knew he was reckless. You knew he was arrogant. But he brought in revenue, so you looked the other way. That's standard industry practice, Henderson started. You're fired, I said. Henderson blinked. Excuse me. You're fired, I repeated. All of you. Every single person at this table. The board is dissolved effective immediately. You can't do that. A woman at the end of the table shrieked. We have contracts. We have tenure. I own 51% of the shares, I said. I can do whatever the hell I want. And what I want is for this room to be empty in 5 minutes. If you're not gone, I'm handing that SD card to the press, along with the minutes of the meetings where you covered up Julian's previous malpractice cases. The threat hung in the air like smoke. They knew I had them. One by one, they stood up. They gathered their folios and laptops, casting hateful glances at Julian, who was still slumped in his chair. They filed out of the room, leaving me alone with the man who killed my mother and my lawyer, Oliver. Julian looked up at me. The arrogance was gone. He looked small. What are you going to do? He whispered. Are you going to kill me? No, I said, walking over to him. That would be too easy. And I'm not a murderer, Julian. Unlike you. I leaned down, bracing my hands on the arms of his chair, trapping him. I'm going to let you live, I said. But you're never going to practice medicine again. Oliver has already sent the footage to the state medical board. Your license is suspended as of right now. Julian flinched. My license, that's my life. Not anymore, I said. And as for the police, well, Detective Mason is in the lobby. He's very interested in the conspiracy to commit capital murder part of that video. That's 20 years, Julian. Minimum. Julian started to cry. Ugly, heaving sobs. Please, Hunter, I can fix this. I have money saved. I can pay you. Morgan, she made me do it. She's the one who wanted the money. She manipulated me. I laughed. It was a dark, hollow sound. Of course she did. And you let her. I stood up and straightened my tie. But before the cops take you, Julian, I need you to do one thing for me. If you do it, Maybe I'll tell the DA to go easy on the sentencing recommendation. Julian looked up, desperation in his eyes. Anything. What is it? My wife thinks I'm overseas, I said. She thinks I'm on a mission. I want you to call her. Right now. Call her. Julian asked, confused. Put it on speaker, I ordered. Tell her you have a surprise. Tell her the board meeting went great, and you're celebrating. Tell her to meet you here. In the ER. At the front desk. Why? Julian asked. Because, I said, walking to the door. I want her to see what happens to things that are broken beyond repair. Julian fumbled for his phone with shaking hands. He dialed Morgan. It rang twice. Hey, baby. Morgan's voice chirped through the speaker. How did it go? Are you the king of the hospital yet? I clenched my jaw, fighting the urge to smash the phone. Julian's voice wavered. He looked at me. I stared him down, my eyes promising violence if he messed this up. Yes, it went amazing. Better than I thought. I knew it. Morgan squealed. We're rich, Julian. We are finally free of that loser. Yeah, Julian choked out. Listen, come to the hospital. Meet me in the lobby. I want to show you something. I'm on my way, she said. I'll be there in 20 minutes. She hung up. I looked at Oliver. Have security escort Dr. Julian to the lobby. Keep him there. Don't let him leave. Wait for the police. And where are you going? Oliver asked. I have one more meeting, I said. With the fire marshal. I took the elevator down to the basement levels, far below the plush offices. I met a man in a high-visibility vest holding a clipboard. This was the city inspector I had hired to review the building's structural integrity immediately after the purchase went through. Mr. Hunter, the inspector said, shaking his head. You were right. This place is a death trap. The wiring is shot. The ventilation system is pumping mold spores into the ICU. The foundation has cracks in the south wing. Honestly, I don't know how this place hasn't been condemned years ago. Condemn it, I said. The inspector paused. Sir, you want me to shut down your own hospital? You just bought it. I bought the land, I said. The building is a disease. Condemn it. Order an immediate evacuation of all patients to the Methodist Center across town. I've already paid for their transfer and treatment. Okay, the inspector said, writing the order. I can post the notice today, but what do you want to do with the structure? It will cost millions to abate the asbestos and demolish it piece by piece. I smiled. It was the first time I had smiled genuinely in days. No, I said, we're not going to take it apart piece by piece. I spoke to the fire chief. The city needs a training ground for high-rise fires. They've been looking for a donation. You want to burn it? The inspector asked, eyes wide. It's the only way to be sure the rot is gone, I said. I checked my watch. 20 minutes had passed. Morgan was walking into the trap. I took the stairs up to the lobby. I wanted to be standing right where my mother died when my wife walked in to celebrate my death. The lobby of Mercy General was unusually quiet. The staff sensed something was wrong. Whispers of the board meeting had already trickled down from the executive floor. Rumors of firings, of a takeover, of police involvement. Nurses were huddled in tight groups, casting nervous glances at the elevators. I stood near the entrance, leaning against a pillar, concealed by a large potted fern. From here, I had a perfect view of the sliding glass doors. And there, standing near the reception desk, was Dr. Julian. He looked like a man walking to the gallows. Two of my private security contractors, big men in plain clothes, were standing just a few feet behind him. They weren't holding him, but their presence made it clear. Run, and it will hurt. Julian was sweating. He kept wiping his palms on his white coat. He checked his watch every 10 seconds. Then, the door slid open. Morgan walked in. She looked stunning. She was wearing a white sundress and oversized sunglasses, carrying a designer bag that I knew I had paid for. She walked with a bounce in her step, the walk of a woman who thinks she has won the lottery. She spotted Julian immediately and waved, beaming. She didn't notice the fear in his eyes. She didn't notice the security guards. She only saw the man she thought was her ticket to a life of luxury. Julian, she called out, her voice echoing in the tense lobby. She rushed over to him, throwing her arms around his neck. Tell me everything. Did they give you the raise? Is the new owner a Saudi prince? Julian didn't hug her back. He stood stiff as a board, his eyes darting toward the pillar where I was hiding. Morgan, he rasped. We need to talk. She pulled back, confused by his tone. She finally looked at his face. What's wrong? You look pale. Did something happen with Hunter? Did he find out? Julian flinched at my name. Hunter isn't overseas, Julian whispered. Morgan froze. What? But he left last night. I saw him pack. He didn't go, Julian said, his voice trembling. He's here. Morgan spun around, scanning the lobby, her face twisting into a mask of panic. Here? Where? Is he following me? No, I said, stepping out from behind the pillar. I was waiting for you. Morgan gasped. She took a stumbling step back, nearly tripping over her own heels. I walked toward them slowly. The sound of my shoes on the tile was the only sound in the lobby. The nurses stopped whispering. The receptionist stopped typing. Everyone watched. Hunter, Morgan stammered. Her eyes darted around, looking for an exit, looking for an explanation. Babe? What? What are you doing here? You said you had a mission. Why are you wearing a suit? I stopped 5 feet away from her. I looked her up and down. The wife I had loved. The woman I had vowed to protect. The mission was domestic, I said calmly. Target acquisition. Threat assessment. Neutralization. I don't understand, she said, forcing a nervous laugh. She reached out to touch my arm. You're scaring me, Hunter. Why are you acting so weird? And why are you with him? She pointed at Julian. I looked at Julian. Tell her, doctor. Tell her who owns this hospital now. Julian looked at the floor. He does, Morgan. Hunter bought it. He owns everything. The building. The land. The contracts. Morgan's jaw dropped. She stared at me, her mind trying to process the impossibility of it. You? But you're broke. We have a mortgage. You drive a 10-year-old truck. I drove a truck because I didn't need a Porsche to feel like a man, I said. And we have a mortgage because I wanted us to build a life together, not just spend money. But you never wanted a life, did you, Morgan? You just wanted a lifestyle. Hunter, wait, she said, her voice rising in pitch. The gears in her head were turning fast. She realized the power dynamic had just flipped 180 degrees. She realized I wasn't the broke soldier anymore. I was a billionaire. She stepped away from Julian, as if he were contagious. She stepped toward me, putting on her best innocent wife face. Baby, listen, she pleaded. I don't know what he told you, but Julian, he's been harassing me. I came here to tell him to stop. He's obsessed with me. I was just trying to be polite because he was your mom's doctor. It was pathetic. It was disgusting. I laughed. Harassing you? Is that what you call it? Because on the video from our living room last night, it looked a lot like you were plotting to have me commit suicide. Morgan's face went white. Video. Hidden cameras, Morgan, I said. Audio. Video. I have it all. The affair. The plan to sell my mother's house. The jokes about my PTSD. The plan to kill me. She looked at Julian. You idiot, she screamed at him, her mask falling completely. You let him record us? You said he was stupid. He played us. Julian shouted back. He played both of us. Enough, I said. I signaled to the security guards. Get them out of my lobby. It's upsetting the patients. You can't do this. Morgan screamed as a guard took her arm. I'm your wife. Half of this is mine. I'll sue you. I'll take half the hospital in the divorce. I walked up to her, invading her personal space. I leaned down and whispered in her ear. You can't take half of zero, Morgan. She blinked. What? I'm condemning the building, I whispered. This hospital is worthless. The company I bought it with? It's a shell. By the time your lawyers file the paperwork, this place will be a pile of ash. There is no asset to split. Just debt. Her eyes widened in horror. You're burning the money? I'm burning the infection, I said. I pulled back. Get her out. The guards dragged them toward the exit. Morgan was screaming obscenities. Julian was weeping. It was a spectacle. But I wasn't done. A heavy silence fell over the lobby. The staff was staring at me. They were terrified. They thought they were next. I turned to the reception desk. A young nurse named Sarah was standing there, clutching a clipboard. She looked like she was about to faint. "You," I said gently. "Why, yes, sir," she squeaked. "Did you work the night my mother came in?" I asked. Sarah nodded slowly, tears welling up in her eyes. "Yes, sir. I was the one who checked her vitals. I tried to get Dr. Julian to come out earlier. I swear. I told him her pressure was dropping. He told me to wait." I looked at her. I remembered her face now. She was the one who had brought me a cup of water while I sat with Mom's body. She was the only one who had looked sad. "I know you did," I said. "I remember." I turned to address the room. "Listen to me," I announced. My voice carried to the back of the waiting room. "This hospital is closing. Effective immediately. The building is unsafe." A murmur of panic rippled through the staff. "What about our jobs?" someone shouted. "What about the patients?" "The patients are being transferred to Methodist right now," I said. "Ambulances are on the way. As for your jobs," I paused. "Anyone who helped Dr. Julian cover up his negligence is fired," I said. "Anyone who stood by and did nothing while he played God is fired." I looked back at Sarah. "But the rest of you? The ones who actually care? The ones who tried?" I pulled a card from my pocket and handed it to Sarah. "I'm building a new center. The Clara Memorial Foundation. It will be state-of-the-art. It will be nonprofit. And it will be free for veterans and their families." I smiled at her. "I need a head nurse. Someone who isn't afraid to yell at a doctor when a patient needs help. The job is yours if you want it. Double your current salary." Sarah stared at the card. Then she looked at me, tears spilling over. "Thank you. Thank you so much." "Don't thank me," I said. "Just pack your things. We have a fire drill to run." Sirens wailed in the distance. Police. Fire trucks. The cavalry was arriving. Detective Mason walked through the doors, flashing his badge. He spotted Julian and Morgan being held by security outside. He nodded to me. "Mr. Hunter?" Mason asked, walking over. "We received the digital evidence packet from your lawyer. That's some disturbing stuff." "It is," I agreed. "We're taking Dr. Julian into custody for gross negligence and conspiracy," Mason said. "And we'd like to bring your wife in for questioning regarding the conspiracy to commit murder charge." "Take them," I said. "But detective, do me a favor." "What's that?" "Make sure they have a good view from the squad car," I said. "I want them to see the fireworks." Mason looked confused, but he nodded. He walked outside to slap cuffs on the pair. I stood alone in the center of the lobby. It was emptying out. Patients were being wheeled out to waiting ambulances. Staff were collecting their bags. I walked over to the spot where the gurney had been, the spot where Mom had taken her last breath. I knelt down and touched the cold tile. "It's almost over, Mom," I whispered. "Just one more thing to do." I stood up and walked out the front doors. The sun was setting, casting a blood-red glow over the city. The fire trucks were pulling up. The fire chief, a burly man named Captain Miller, jumped out. "Mr. Hunter," Miller shouted, shaking my hand. "The boys are ready. We've been needing a structure like this to train on for years." "You sure about this?" "It's a perfectly good shell." "It's not good, Captain," I said, looking up at the towering glass facade. "It's rotten to the core. Burn it all." Firefighters began unloading hoses and tools, their voices echoing across the parking lot. The flashing lights threw red reflections across the hospital's mirrored glass, painting it a haunting shade, like the whole building was already bleeding. I stood beside Captain Miller as he gave out orders. "Evacuate perimeter, safety line at 50 feet. We'll run the demo ignition in phases. North wing first, then roll it," he said, his voice steady, practiced. He turned back to me. "You sure about this, Mr. Hunter?" "City signed the training permit. But once we start, this place is gone for good." "That's the point," I said quietly. "It's taken enough from good people." Miller studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "All right then. You'll be the honorary trigger." You built the plan, you start the purge. As his team moved to position, I took a slow walk across the cracked parking lot, the hospital looming above me. Every window of that place held ghosts, patients who deserved mercy, nurses who had tried their best, men like Julian who thought they were gods. From the back of a patrol car across the street, Morgan and Julian sat cuffed and silent. She was still trying to talk her way out of it, pleading with Detective Mason, her voice sharp with panic. Julian just stared at the pavement, hollow, broken, humiliated beyond words. He wasn't a doctor anymore. He wasn't anything. I stopped near the entrance. It looked just like the night Mom died. Same glass doors, same sterile smell of cleaning chemicals. The difference was me. That night I was powerless. Now I had control. Captain Miller walked up, handing me a heavy metal remote, an industrial detonator shaped like a controller, covered with safety toggles. It was attached to a bright red cable leading to the ignition rig inside. Flip the red cover, he said. Press and hold for 3 seconds. Once you lift your finger, it goes. You ready? I looked at the remote in my hand. The word ignite was stenciled across it in black. The irony wasn't lost on me. I had spent months in sand and smoke overseas, trying to stop things from burning. Tonight, I was the one lighting the match. I glanced at Julian one last time. I wanted him to see my lips move when I said it. This one's for her. I flipped the cover and pressed down. The first explosion came from deep inside the West Wing, just a low, muffled thump. Then another, higher, louder. Windows shattered in sequence, blooming smoke like flowers of ash. In seconds, orange flames curled through the lower floors, licking at the blue night sky. Fire roared upward, alive and furious. The heat hit like a wall, even from the safe distance. The air shimmered. Every floor looked like a different level of hell. Sheets of paper swirling in fiery whirlwinds, steel beams glowing like lava. I didn't move. I couldn't. I just watched it burn, floor by floor, office by office. The place that had taken my mother from me was now collapsing on itself, dying exactly the way it had let her die, slowly, painfully, with no one to save it. Miller's crew stood back, observing the blaze like they were watching a living thing being destroyed. Feed complete, one of them said into the radio. Control burn achieved. The crowd that had gathered behind the barricades was gasping, some even cheering. To them, it was just fire training. To me, it was catharsis. Detective Mason walked over, his expression unreadable. Hell of a sight, he said. You sure it isn't too much? Too much was when she called for help and no one came. I said, never taking my eyes off the flames. This is balance. Behind us, Morgan started screaming again from the patrol car window, pounding on the glass. You're insane, Hunter. You can't just destroy everything. You'll get nothing out of this. I turned around, the glow of the fire reflecting off her face. She looked truly afraid now, not of prison, not of the police, but of irrelevance. I already got what I wanted, I said. You finally understand what it feels like to lose everything. Julian didn't say a word. He just looked at the fire, eyes glassy, silent tears cutting through the soot on his face. Maybe for the first time, he realized exactly how many lives his arrogance had burned before tonight. The hospital's main entrance collapsed, sending a fountain of sparks into the sky. The ER sign twisted in the heat before dropping into the flames. I couldn't help it, I smiled. Miller approached again. She's done, he said softly. Building's down to frame. We'll let it burn out overnight. Let it, I said. Don't save it. Not this one. The city skyline behind us glowed red. Somewhere down the street, church bells rang faintly through the night. For a moment, it sounded like absolution. I felt a weight lift off me I hadn't known I'd been carrying. A deep, silent exhale inside my chest. Where will you go now? Mason asked. That building's gone. Your wife is facing charges. The doctor's headed for prison. What's left for you? I looked back at the ashes. Something new, I said. Something that matters. He nodded once, respectful. I'll see to it they don't bother you again. When he walked away, I stayed. I stood there until the fire was nothing but embers, until every beam had fallen. My mind ran through the image of Mom's smile, the way she used to hum quietly when cooking breakfast before sunrise. "Rest easy, Mom," I said gently. "The world won't forget you again." A single ember floated down, landing near my boot, glowing like a star before fading away. I turned and walked into the night, the fire at my back lighting my path forward. The next morning, the city woke to headlines and smoke. Every news channel carried the same footage: an inferno consuming Mercy General Hospital, the blaze lighting up the skyline like judgment itself. Reporters called it a controlled demolition fire, but their voices hummed with scandal. New owner linked to prior patient death. One anchor said. Another, hospital group collapses after malpractice, scandal revealed. I turned the volume down. The hotel room was quiet again. For the first time in weeks, I'd slept deeply. No alarms, no shouts, no jolts awake from memories of sand and gunfire. Only silence. Across the room, my suit jacket hung on the chair. The cuffs were still faintly dusted with ash. Underneath, it was a framed photo of Mom I had grabbed before the funeral. The same image she'd kept on the kitchen counter for years, just her smiling in the backyard, sunlight on her cheeks. I sat up, stretching. The ache in my chest was still there, but lighter, like grief had finally loosened its grip. A knock came at the door. "Come in," I said. Oliver stepped inside, looking tense but relieved. He was carrying a tablet and a folder. "It's done," he said. The destruction report came through. City inspectors categorized the burn as a successful training exercise. No legal backlash. "You're clear." I nodded. "And them?" "Julian's being held without bail," he said. "Preliminary charges include second-degree murder, conspiracy, and multiple malpractice suits reopened by the Attorney General. He's finished." "And Morgan?" "Attempted murder, fraud, collusion. She's claiming coercion, but the jury will hate her, especially with those recordings. She'll either cut a deal or spend a decade staring at concrete walls." I leaned back against the headboard. No smile this time. No anger, no thrill. Just a quiet emptiness. Oliver hesitated. He took a seat on the corner of the bed. "You finally got everything you wanted, Hunter. Revenge, justice, closure. Why do you look worse now than you did 2 nights ago?" I stared out the window. Thick gray smoke was still drifting into the winter sky where the hospital used to stand. The city looked clean around it, almost refreshed, but the hole in the skyline was sharp and raw. "Because closure isn't clean," I said quietly. "Revenge doesn't end something. It just stops it from spreading. The disease is gone, but the scar stays." Oliver nodded slowly. "Still, your mom would be proud. Most people would have just screamed into the void. You rebuilt the entire system around her name." I looked down at the folder he slid to me. The logo on top read, "The Clara Memorial Foundation." Inside were blueprints, sleek, modern designs for a new trauma center, a veterans rehab wing, a family counseling floor. No billing office, no insurance counter, just care, real care. "It's fully funded," Oliver said. "Anonymous trust, public-facing board. You'll stay out of it. Legally, no ownership trail leading back to Hunter." I ran my fingers across Mom's name stamped on the top page. "She hated hospitals," I murmured. "Can't believe her name's going on one." Oliver grinned faintly. "Good. That means she'll keep them honest." He handed me a keycard. "Construction starts next month. There's one person asking to meet you about staffing, nurse named Sarah. She says you offered her a position." I remembered her face, streaked with tears when I had handed her the card amidst the chaos. "Yeah," I said. "She's earned it. Schedule it." Oliver stood, gathering his things. "You should also be ready for media pressure. Once people connect your name to the sale, it'll go public. You'll be the man who burned a hospital. Half the world will hate you. The other half will turn you into something you're not." "Let them," I said. "I didn't do it for them." Oliver gave me a look, part fear, part respect, and left. Silence filled the room again. Morning light hit the photo of Mom on the table, lighting her face like she was listening, amused by it all. I picked up the frame and stood by the window, the city stretching out before me. Traffic moved as normal. The world didn't stop. It rarely does. People die, things burn, and still the sun rises like it doesn't care what we've lost. I whispered to the glass. "It's over, Mom." Right then, my phone buzzed. A message from an unsaved number appeared on the screen. For a moment, my breath caught. It wasn't from a reporter. It wasn't from Oliver. It was a single sentence. No name. No number trace. "You think you burned it all, but some fires don't die that easy." I stared at it, frowning. My pulse kicked. Before I could reply, the phone pinged again, a photo this time. The image loaded slowly through the weak hotel Wi-Fi. A dark basement, concrete walls, a metal sign half covered in soot. It read, "Mercy General, Lower Storage Wing." And below it, a date stamp. Yesterday. The message blinked in again. "What you buried survived." I looked back out the window at the rising smoke curling above the ruin, twisting upward into the bright sky. For a moment, I thought I heard my mother's voice in my head, soft but stern. "Hunter, some things don't stay burned until you find their roots." I tightened my grip on the phone. Somewhere beneath that ash, something was still alive. And this time, I wasn't after revenge. I was after truth. My phone screen dimmed out after a few seconds, but that text burned itself into my mind. "What you buried survived." The air in the hotel room suddenly felt colder. Every instinct from years of combat kicked in. The stillness before contact, the prickling feeling that eyes were watching you through glass or through time. I rewound the thought once, then again. That photo, the basement, the sign marked Mercy General, Lower Storage Wing. According to every city demolition record, that entire section was reduced to rubble. Structural report confirmed total collapse. Nothing should have been left recognizable. I grabbed my jacket and keys. No hesitation. No calling ahead. If something was still breathing in those ruins, I needed to see it with my own eyes. The streets were quiet when I drove out of the city. The smoke still lingered over the charred remains of the hospital, thin and gray in the noon light now. Workers were clearing debris at the perimeter, hauling twisted steel onto flatbeds. I flashed the credentials Oliver had arranged for the post-demolition inspection crew. They waved me through. The ground beyond the cordon felt different, silted with ash, unstable underfoot. I walked past blackened skeletons of beams and concrete slabs cracked like dry earth. The old emergency sign lay in pieces, half buried in soot. It smelled of ruin. But beneath that, a faint whiff of something metallic, electrical, almost alive. Down near the eastern edge of the site, a fire supervisor shouted orders to a group of workers. "Stay clear of the lower section. We found a sealed crawl space. Structural engineers will check it first." Crawl space. My heart kicked once hard. I picked my way down the embankment toward him. "Where's the opening?" I asked. He pointed with his gloved hand toward a fissure in the concrete where the foundation had buckled. A faint draft seeped up from it, carrying a smell of damp and chemicals. I crouched. Show my flashlight inside. Metal stairs led downward, twisted but intact. They disappeared into darkness. Was this on the building schematics? I asked. The supervisor shook his head. "No. Plans we got show sub-basement stopping at level 2. This looks like level 3. Old maintenance tunnel, maybe Cold War, era storage. We'll seal it after inspection." "Not yet," I said. "Let me see first." He frowned, but didn't argue. I descended carefully, one step at a time, boot sole scraping steel still warm from the burn. The deeper I went, the older it smelled, rust, dust, disinfectant, memories of sickness baked into the walls. At the bottom, the beam of my flashlight hit metal doors welded halfway shut. The hinges had melted in the fire, warping them slightly open. I stepped through the gap sideways. The light swept across crates, filing cabinets warped by heat, and something else. Rows of plastic body bags, stacked and tagged. Old ones. Some charred, some faded. each tagged with a red number and stamped, transfer pending. Storage, not morgue. This was overflow, unclaimed patients that had never been processed. I froze when my light caught one tag that hadn't turned to ash. See, Hunter. Mom's name. My throat went dry. I knelt, brushing soot off the tag with my thumb. The handwriting wasn't hospital standard. It was rushed, half illegible. Below it, another signature mark, J.V. Julian's initials. The bag was empty. Inside was nothing but dust and scraps of melted vinyl. So why tag it like that? Why store it down here? Behind me, the faint creak of metal echoed through the tunnel, a sound like someone stepping on broken stairs. I turned sharply, flashlight sweeping across the dark. No one, just settling debris. Still, I backed toward the stairs. My brain was sprinting faster than my feet. That message wasn't a taunt. It was a warning. Someone had known I'd find this. Someone who wanted me to see it. Back in daylight, I pulled out my phone again and snapped photos of the bag, the tag, the vault. I called Oliver. He answered on the second ring, sounding half out of breath. Hunter, where are you? At the site, I said. There's a hidden level under the east wing. You didn't see it on the plans? No, he paused. Why? I found something. Storage vault. Body bags. But one of them had my mom's name, tagged by Julian. And it's empty. Oliver was silent for a long moment. Then he said, carefully, You're saying her body's missing? Yes. He exhaled sharply. Hunter, listen. Those reports of total burn coverage weren't precise. Some of the underground freezer systems had separate power from a private grid. That's why the fire teams couldn't reach them. Maybe they moved the remains for evidence protection, state coroner's work. No, I said. These were hidden, not preserved. There was another pause, then a shifting tone in his voice. I might know who'd message you. Who? There was a nurse I spoke with last week. Someone who'd worked nights under Julian before your mom's case. She vanished after the first investigation started. No forwarding info. No new address and payroll. What was her name? I asked. Violet. The line crackled and died. I looked at the phone, battery fine, full bars. The call hadn't dropped. It had been cut. From far across the debris field, one of the demolition workers shouted up to the supervisor, voice echoing off the steel shells of what used to be hospital walls. Hey boss, we found a sealed door deeper in the ground. Label says cryo storage, restricted. Still got power. Get someone authorized to open it. Cryo storage. My fingers tightened around the phone until my knuckles hurt. Julian had always bragged about cutting-edge preservation research. He was testing for a new donor initiative, something to do with organ freezing, transferring licenses offshore. What if it wasn't research? What if people down here were never meant to be declared dead in the first place? I turned back toward the pit, where smoke still rose around blackened rebar. The city around me buzzed faintly in the distance, unaware a nightmare could still be pulsing under their feet. The fire had burned the lies, but not the root of it. And if Julian's sins had reached lower than the surface, then it wasn't over. Not yet. I started down the tunnel again, flashlight shaking slightly in my hand, every step echoing off the hollow steel. Somewhere in the dark, in the hum of hidden machines still clinging to power, I could almost hear my mother's voice whisper again. Find the truth, Hunter, before it finds you first. The air in the broken sublevel was cold enough to sting, thick with the metallic smell of ash and ozone. Flickers of dying emergency lights pulsed red against the concrete walls, strange, considering no power grid should still be active. I had been underground for nearly an hour, weaving past melted railings and collapsed ducts. The deeper I went, the stronger the hum grew. It wasn't just the sound of a generator. It was rhythmic, mechanical, alive. At the bottom of the stairwell, the corridor split into two, one direction sealed by a caved-in passageway, the other marked with a flickering sign barely hanging from a wire. CRYO storage. Restricted access. I pulled the flashlight tighter in my grip and pushed forward. A steel door waited just ahead, blackened at the edges but not warped. Heat had licked it, but never reached inside. The keypad's faceplate was cracked, but a faint green light still blinked behind the surface. It shouldn't have had power, yet it did. I tried the handle. It was locked solid. For a moment, I stood there listening. The air beyond it hissed softly, like cold air bleeding through. And from somewhere behind that door came a long, low beeping sound. The same tone I'd heard in the "Are the Night Mom" flatlined. One stretched note, then silence. Another. I took a step back and scanned the floor for anything useful. Near the wall, half buried in debris, lay a fire axe. Its metal edge was warped, but it would still swing. I braced my feet and swung once. The blow rang through the corridor, echoing. The latch bent. I swung again. Metal shrieked. The door cracked open with a gust of air so cold, it made frost bloom instantly across the steel. Inside was darkness. Then the light flicked on automatically, triggered by my entry. Rows of containment pods lined the walls, cylindrical and covered in frost. A soft blue glow pulsed from each, heart monitor lights, still running. There weren't supposed to be any patients left. Not down here. I walked the aisle slowly, reading the brittle labels on each frosted pod. The names were faded, some unreadable, but two near the far end were fresh, handwritten, taped awkwardly on. J. Vance C. Hunter, Julian's last name. My mother's name. I froze. My breath fogged in front of me. No, I whispered. The panel on Mom's pod blinked a slow, green rhythm. Date of entry, July 18th, 3 days after her death. Every rational part of my mind tried to reject it. Body storage, research preservation, postmortem burns. But deep down, I already knew Julian's arrogance had always been tied to his experiments. He'd wanted immortality, not medicine. I pressed my hand against the frozen glass. For a second, I thought I saw movement inside, faint outlines under the ice. Behind me, a sound of static crackled from an old wall speaker. Then, a voice came through, hollow, almost mechanical, but familiar enough to make my heart stutter. Hunter, you shouldn't be here. I turned. No one. Just the hiss of old circuitry. Julian. The voice coughed a ghostly laugh. Not quite. Julian recorded the AI system himself. Built it for data storage, patient trials, prototype memory transfer. You're trespassing, Mr. Hunter. My flashlight flickered. I aimed it up at the ceiling and found an old camera lens glowing faint red. Shut it off, I said. This place is condemned. No, the voice replied. This place is sanctified. You think you took her away from me? It wasn't Liv. It was a recording keyed to my voice print. Julian had left messages, like breadcrumbs, expecting me to find them. From the speakers, static reshaped into his tone, arrogant, proud, drenched in that same venom he'd carried in life. Your mother was extraordinary. Her heart stopped. Yes, but her cellular structure, it resisted collapse. I preserved what I could. Call it curiosity, call it science. You call it murder. I call it proof. I gritted my teeth. Proof of what? That compassion is evolution's mistake, the recording said. She cried for others, even as she died. I wanted to understand what drove someone to care that deeply, so I kept her heart alive, in pieces. The machinery around me thudded faintly, pumps and tubes humming to a dull rhythm. I ripped open the nearest cabinet panel. Inside were jars, medical vials frozen mid-process. Labels read, cardiac tissue preservation / sample CH / active. Anger surged up through the nausea. My vision blurred. That monster had turned my mother's death into an experiment. Even after the fire, his legacy still pulsed underground, beating with stolen life. Not anymore, I said. I reached for the master terminal on the wall. Its display barely functioned, lines of code trembling under frost. CRYO sequence active. 124 years remaining. One touch on the override would cut power, but I hesitated, hand trembling over the command. Because if I did this, every sample, every trace, every ounce of her biological memory would vanish too. Mom, I whispered. If you're still in here somehow. The hum grew louder, impossibly louder, the pod's power surging, lights flickering. The speaker hissed again, and this time the voice wasn't Julian. It was softer, feminine. Hunter, I froze. The sound carried no mechanical echo, no distortion, just breath, just warmth. For a flash, I wanted to believe it, needed to. But logic fought back. Old voice recordings could fragment into illusions when systems failed. Still, the word lingered. My name, exactly in her tone, exactly how she'd said it when she wanted me to stop fighting as a teenager. I stared at the pod and whispered, "I'm here, Mom." A faint heartbeat thudded once through the chamber, not imagined, not electronic. Deep, real, from within the metal. Then silence. Tears blurred my vision. I reached for the control again. Anger eclipsed hesitation. Mercy didn't belong in this lab. I flipped the manual override. A siren howled through the corridor, metal steaming as coolant began to drain. One by one, pods flickered and shut down. Blue light blinked out to darkness. I stood there until the final hum died. Then I smashed the terminal with the butt of the fire axe until sparks burst like shooting stars. The power cut. The air went still. I turned back once more. Now you can rest. Up the stairs, distant shouts rang out. Demolition workers calling for everyone to evacuate again. One yelled something about pressure buildup in the basement, but I was already halfway out the door. By the time I reached daylight, the ground under Mercy General trembled with a dull, low rumble. The last of the flames had reignited. The smoke still tasted like grief, but finally, it was clean. The second explosion shook the ground like thunder chasing lightning. The buried tunnels of Mercy General collapsed for the last time, sealing away the cold vaults forever. Black smoke rose again into the pale sky, but this time it felt different, cleaner, freer, like the past was burning itself out. I stood at the top of the hill overlooking the site, my coat flapping in the wind. The distant sirens sounded muffled, distant. The hospital that once refused to save my mother was gone. Every wall, every bed, every stain of its cruelty turned to ash. And just beyond the horizon, where smoke became sunlight, the steel frame of something new was rising. The Clara Memorial Center. I visited the construction site for the first time a month later. The workers had already started pouring the foundation, gray concrete spreading across fresh soil where the hospital once stood. The smell of burn had vanished, replaced by rain, earth, and promise. Nurse Sarah walked beside me, holding a clipboard, her bright eyes scanning the progress. "Every room designed for accessibility," she said. "Free clinic on the ground floor. Veterans housing upstairs. Your mother's quote engraved on the main entrance. No one deserves to be left waiting." I smiled. She'd like that. Behind us, volunteers were unloading boxes of donated medical gear, everything brand new. Not one cent of insurance paperwork attached. This was her legacy, not mine. A car pulled up by the gate. Oliver stepped out and handed me a small envelope. Inside was a single photo, an aerial shot of the completed demolition, the ashes shaped almost perfectly like angel wings. Maybe coincidence. Maybe not. "You finally got your piece," Oliver said softly. "Not peace," I replied. "Purpose." He nodded, and for a long moment, we both stared at the horizon. The wind hummed through unfinished hallways. Rebar gleamed in the sunlight. The land was no longer cursed. It was blessed, not by faith, but by love born out of pain. I placed a single flower down on the wet soil where Mom's ER bed once stood. White lily, her favorite. "You were right, Mom," I whispered. Compassion was never weakness. It was the torch that survived the fire. I looked up at the sky, blue and endless, and smiled. Then I turned away, ready to move forward. Because some stories aren't about revenge. They're about making sure no one else ever needs one. So tell me, if your mother, your family, your loved one, was denied help because of greed, what would you have done in my place? Comment below where you're watching from, and tell me what kind of stories you love hearing the most. heartbreaking revenge, lost love, or justice reborn. I'll bring you even more unforgettable tales made just for you. Hit that like button if this story touched your heart. Subscribe to our channel for the next thrilling revenge story, and stay tuned for another emotional, epic journey. Until next time, take care of yourself and never forget, some scars burn, but some can light the way home.